iDeCo accounts here in Japan are an amazing tool to save for retirement. I've had one for as long as I've been able to. My wife's had one since before they were called iDeCo, and she's built up an investment pot of over 20 million yen in the tax advantage account. The RetireJapan guide to iDeCo is one of our oldest and most successful publications, and I've been recommending that people use iDeCo pretty much since I started RetireJapan in 2013. But is iDeCo for everyone? And should you have an iDeCo account? Let's talk about it. So iDeCo, the individual defined contribution retirement account in Japan, started off as something that only self-employed or freelance people could pay into. It's a tax advantaged account, so you pay in pre-tax income. Basically, you're lowering your income for tax purposes and therefore lowering the amount of income tax and local inhabitants tax and so on that you pay. Over the years, iDeCo has expanded in terms of who is allowed to use it. First freelancers, then employees of private companies, and finally public servants are allowed to use it. From 2027, the amount of money you can put into iDeCo is going to be going up. And for those that can afford to, paying into an iDeCo account is a really good way to save for retirement and really boost your saving and investing, because not only are you investing in the iDeCo account, you're also paying less tax, and you can use those tax savings to invest even more, whether that's in a NISA account or a taxable account. But should everyone be using iDeCo? Possibly not. Had a question last week from a viewer, and the question was basically, I am planning to retire early. I'm working towards early retirement, so I probably shouldn't be using iDeCo, right? Because iDeCo doesn't allow you to access the investments until you reach the age of 60. I want to retire before then, so obviously iDeCo is not suitable for me. Now, that was a great question. It's a very common kind of misconception, I believe, so I'd like to talk about that. But first, who are the people who shouldn't be using iDeCo? Well, there aren't that many. US citizens may or may not be able to use iDeCo. It seems like a bit of a grey area at the moment. There isn't really a consensus on whether it's okay for US citizens to use iDeCo or not. Some CPAs say yes, some CPAs say no. The IRS has not ruled definitively on this. If you want to learn a bit more about this, there's a link in the description to our US citizens page, and you can read about it there. So US citizens, not sure. If you have a tax professional, ask them, and hopefully they'll be able to give you guidance. Who else shouldn't use iDeCo? Well, people who don't pay income tax. So if your income is low enough that you're not paying income tax, or you're paying income tax at a very low level, iDeCo might not make sense to you. The biggest benefit of iDeCo is that it lowers your taxes, and basically you get the benefit according to your marginal tax rate. So the higher your income is, the higher your marginal tax rate, the more beneficial iDeCo is. If you're not paying very much income tax, then paying into iDeCo is not going to save you all that much money, and you will have to deal with all the kind of complexities that come with an iDeCo account. So the lower your income, the less useful iDeCo is. Another person who perhaps might not want to use iDeCo is someone who's not going to retire in Japan. The basic idea of iDeCo is you pay in, you get the tax break on it, but you're not allowed to access the money until you're 60. You have to reach age 60 in order to cash out. And at that point, you have to have 10 years of investments as well. So if you start using iDeCo later than 50, you might not be able to cash in immediately upon reaching age 60. You have to look into the details for that. We have a link to the iDeCo info page where it goes into the details on that kind of timing. There are some circumstances where you can cash out iDeCo early. So as long as you haven't paid in more than a certain amount or for longer than a certain amount of time. As long as you're not Japanese, when you leave Japan permanently, you can sometimes cash out your iDeCo account. If you don't fulfill those conditions, however, you will have to just leave your iDeCo account in Japan. You're still able to manage the investments, but you can't cash it out until age 60. And of course, many people, if they've left Japan, they've got nothing to do with Japan, will find it a little bit annoying, to say the least, to try and deal with the Japanese financial institution that has their iDeCo account, do the paperwork in Japanese, and get them to cash out the account and send you the money once you get to age 60. So if you're not planning to be in Japan for retirement, perhaps you might want to skip iDeCo for now. But how about people who are aiming to retire early? Should they not bother with iDeCo just because they can't get the money until they're 60? Well, I don't think so. There's a slight misunderstanding here. If this is how you're thinking about iDeCo, it means that you're kind of considering your investments as a whole, whereas it's better to consider your portfolio as different buckets according to what kind of account you're using. So you might have your iDeCo account, you might have your NISA account, and if you're lucky enough to have filled your NISA account, you may also have a taxable account. And these accounts all behave in slightly different ways. Even with the larger limits coming in 2027 for iDeCo, it's unlikely that someone will be able to save and invest enough money just inside an iDeCo account to be able to kind of consider themselves financially independent, potentially retire early. Realistically, someone aiming to retire early is going to be using iDeCo, but they're also going to be using NISA, and they're probably also going to be using a taxable account. Because of this, the fact that you can't access your iDeCo funds until age 60 is not a problem, because when you hit your kind of target number for retirement, you would of course first spend from perhaps your taxable account, perhaps from your NISA account, and by doing that, that would get you through to age 60 when you could access your iDeCo account for the first time. So you don't need to have your entire portfolio at your disposal the day that you decide to retire. You're going to be spending it down slowly, gradually, over time, and hopefully, even if you've put a lot of money into iDeCo, you should also have enough money outside iDeCo to bridge the gap between your retirement date and the date when you're able to access iDeCo. Of course, you should also be taking any kind of pensions into account so that your timeline is going to be retire early, start spending from your taxable accounts probably, leave your NISA to continue growing, leave your iDeCo to continue growing. If you run out of money in the taxable accounts, you start spending your NISA accounts. Then you hit age 60, you get access to iDeCo, but you might want to leave it to go because you can leave iDeCo to keep growing until age 75. And then your pensions will kick in, your Japanese pension, possibly a foreign pension as well. So thinking about retirement spending is a bit more complicated than just saying, okay, so here's the finish date, here's my money, I'm just going to spend it down until I go. You have to think about where to spend from, what order to access your accounts, and lots of other things. Financial planning is very much a process. It's not a static event. It's not like, oh, I've finished planning. It's something that you're going to continue thinking about before retirement, as you retire, and post-retirement as well. I semi-retired in 2022, but I'm still paying into iDeCo because it makes sense for me. I get a tax break for doing it. And when I cash out of iDeCo, it's going to be largely tax advantaged as well. So this makes a lot of sense for me. You're going to have to think about whether it makes sense for you. But for most people who are planning to stay in Japan for retirement, a combination of iDeCo and NISA, and then possibly a taxable account, if you manage to fill those, is going to be the best way to approach your investing. If your income is low and you haven't got a huge amount of money to invest, I might focus on NISA first because NISA is very simple. And if you're not getting the big tax savings from using iDeCo, it might be worth focusing on NISA first. If you're able to pay into iDeCo, then it might make sense to do so even at the minimum 5,000 yen a month level, just so you can build up your tax-free allowance for iDeCo. We'll be talking about iDeCo taxation in a future video. So just to wrap it up, people that might not want to use iDeCo, possibly American citizens, do check with your own tax professional about that. People who have very low income, they maybe don't pay income tax at all, or they pay very little income tax, might be worth focusing on NISA instead. And people who are not planning to retire in Japan, having an iDeCo account might just be a little bit too much hassle. But that's a judgment call that you're going to have to make. So what is your thinking on iDeCo? Do you already have an account? How are you finding it? If you don't have an account yet, do you have any questions about iDeCo that you'd like to ask? Please put them in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.